There are things in this world that science refuses to acknowledge, not because the evidence isn't there, but because accepting it would mean rewriting everything we think we understand about human nature. I'm 55 years old now, and I've carried a secret for more than 2 decades that sits in my chest like a stone. I've told no one. Not my sister who calls every Sunday. Not the ranger who became my only friend during those years. Not even the university colleagues who still send me emails asking why I disappeared from academia at 32. They think I had a breakdown. They are not entirely wrong. But what broke me wasn't madness. It was truth. A truth so profound and terrible that even now, speaking it into existence feels like betraying something sacred. I moved to northern Maine in 1998, young and ambitious, convinced I'd make my name studying gray wolf reintroduction patterns. I had grants, equipment, and enough idealism to believe that isolation was romantic rather than dangerous. The cabin I rented sat 40 miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a logging road that became impassable 4 months of the year. The silence up there was absolute. You could hear your own heartbeat in that kind of quiet. Hear the blood moving through your veins. I loved it at first. The vast forest of old-growth pine and hemlock, the mountains rising like cathedral walls, the cold so pure it burned your lungs clean. I thought I was studying nature. I didn't realize nature was about to teach me something that no textbook, no peer-reviewed journal, no carefully controlled experiment could ever explain. The first winter was brutal. Temperatures dropped to 30 below, and the snow accumulated in drifts that buried my truck to the windows. I'd see wolf tracks occasionally, deer trails, the delicate impressions of snowshoe hairs. Normal things. Explicable things. But in January, I started noticing something else. Tracks that didn't make sense. They were humanoid, bare feet in the snow, but the stride was wrong. Too long, too deliberate, and they appeared in places no human had any reason to be. Deep in the forest, miles from any trail. I told myself it was a practical joke, maybe local kids trying to scare the outsider. But the tracks appeared during blizzards, in places I knew no one could reach without proper gear. And there was something else. A smell. It came and went with the tracks, a smell like meat left too long in a broken freezer, mixed with something sharper, more organic, like the inside of a mouth or an infected wound. I was a scientist. I documented everything. I took photographs, measurements, soil samples. I set up motion-triggered cameras along the trail routes. For 3 weeks, I got nothing unusual. Just deer, the occasional fox, shadows, and snow. Then one camera captured something that made my hands shake so badly I could barely review the footage. It was 3:47 a.m. according to the timestamp. The frame showed a figure moving through the trees, upright like a human but wrong in ways that my brain struggled to process. Too tall. Too thin. The proportions were distorted, elongated, as if someone had taken a human form and stretched it like taffy. The face turned toward the camera for just 2 frames, maybe a quarter of a second, and what I saw in those frames has never left me. Sunken eyes that reflected the infrared light like an animal's. A jaw that hung slightly open, revealing too many teeth. But the expression. God help me, the expression was human. There was recognition there. Awareness. Intelligence. I didn't sleep for 2 days after seeing that footage. I checked and rechecked the camera, looking for malfunctions, corrupted data, anything that would explain what I'd seen as a technical glitch. But the image was clean, clear, undeniable. I knew what the indigenous peoples of this region had spoken about for centuries. I'd read the accounts during my graduate research, dismissed them as cultural mythology, survival folklore meant to warn against the dangers of isolation and starvation. The Wendigo. A creature born from the worst of human circumstances. A transformation triggered by crossing certain boundaries that civilization pretends don't exist. I'd laughed about it in a classroom once, young and arrogant, treating centuries of indigenous knowledge as quaint superstition. That laughter felt obscene now, a kind of violence I'd committed against wisdom I was too educated to respect. The rational thing would have been to leave. Pack my equipment, abandon the research, return to civilization and pretend I'd seen nothing more than a sick bear or a confused hermit. But I didn't leave. Maybe it was scientific curiosity. Maybe it was something darker, A recognition that I'd stumbled onto something that could define my entire career, prove something impossible, make me famous or destroy me completely. Or maybe, and this is what haunts me most, I was already too isolated, too far from normal human connection, and the creature represented the only other consciousness in that vast frozen wilderness. Whatever the reason, I stayed. And I started leaving food. It began simply enough. Deer carcasses from my freezer, left at the edge of the clearing near my cabin. I told myself I was observing, documenting, maintaining scientific objectivity. But the truth was messier than that. The truth was I wanted to see it again. To confirm that what I'd witnessed wasn't madness or mistake. The food disappeared every time, always at night, always silently. Then one evening in late February, as I sat by my window watching the sunset turn the snow pink and gold, I saw it standing at the tree line. Fully visible. Unmoving. Watching me watch it. It was nearly 7 feet tall, skeletal thin, skin stretched over bones that seemed too long for any human frame. But the worst part wasn't the physical wrongness. It was the eyes. They held something I recognized, a desperate, drowning intelligence, like someone trapped behind glass, screaming without sound. We stood there for maybe 5 minutes, 100 yards apart, neither of us moving. Then it turned and walked back into the forest with a gait that was almost graceful, almost human, but not quite either. That night I wrote in my journal, "I think it knows I'm not a threat. I think it's been watching me as carefully as I've been watching it." The winter progressed into a strange, unspoken routine. I'd leave food. It would take the food. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses through the trees, a flash of pale skin, an elongated shadow. I recorded everything, filling notebooks with observations that read like the journals of a man losing his grip on reality. But I wasn't losing my mind. I was learning. I noticed patterns. The creature avoided moonlight, preferred the darkest nights. It moved through the forest with an intimate knowledge of every trail, every hollow, every shelter. It was territorial but not aggressive. And it was intelligent. That intelligence was the most disturbing aspect. Not the physical transformation, but the consciousness that remained trapped inside it. In April, when the snow started melting and the forest began its slow resurrection, I found something that changed everything. A backpack, weathered and torn, half buried in mud near one of the old logging trails. Inside were a driver's license, a wallet, and a journal. The license belonged to Michael Rothstein, age 34 when it was issued in 1989. The photograph showed a normal man, slightly built, serious expression, the kind of face you'd forget an hour after meeting. The journal was water-damaged but partially readable. It told the story of a biology PhD student who'd come to these woods for field research, got caught in an early winter storm, ran out of supplies, and faced a choice that no human should ever have to make. The last coherent entry, dated November 1989, read, "Hunger isn't the worst part. It's how hunger changes what you are, what you're willing to do, what you're willing to become. I can feel myself disappearing. Not dying, that would be mercy. Disappearing into something else. Something that knows what I was but can't remember why it mattered." I sat in my cabin holding that journal, understanding with perfect, terrible clarity what I'd been feeding for 3 months. This wasn't a cryptid or a monster or folklore come to life. This was a man. Or what remained of a man after the worst kind of survival. The Wendigo wasn't supernatural. It was transformation. Physiological, neurological, a cascade of changes triggered by circumstances so extreme they pushed human biology beyond its normal boundaries. Starvation, isolation, the breaking of certain taboos. The indigenous peoples hadn't been telling ghost stories. They'd been documenting a phenomenon that Western science was too arrogant to acknowledge because it contradicted everything we believed about fixed human nature. That spring, I made a decision that I've questioned every day since. I kept the secret. I maintained the feeding. And I tried to understand what Michael Rothstein had become, even though every attempt at understanding felt like complicity. The creature, I couldn't think of it as Michael anymore, that person was gone, grew slightly less cautious. It would approach closer to the cabin, sometimes sitting at the edge of the clearing for hours, just existing in the same space as me. There was a profound loneliness in those encounters, a reaching across an unbridgeable gap. I was the only human it had encountered in years who didn't run, didn't shoot, didn't report it to authorities who would treat it as a threat to be eliminated. Summer brought hikers and researchers back to the region, and with them came danger. The creature retreated deeper into the forest, appearing less frequently. I heard rumors in town about strange sightings, missing livestock, sounds in the woods that couldn't be explained. A hunting party was being organized. The local ranger, Tom Blackwood, came to my cabin in July to ask if I'd seen anything unusual. I looked him in the eyes and lied with an ease that scared me. Nothing unusual, I said. Just normal wildlife patterns. He nodded, but I could see the doubt there, the suspicion that I knew more than I was saying. I told myself I was protecting scientific discovery, preserving something unique and irreplaceable. But really, I was protecting a secret that had become more important to me than truth, more important than my career or ethics or the safety of others. The hunting party went out in August, 12 men with rifles and dogs, tracking reports of what they called a dangerous hermit terrorizing the backcountry. I found the creature 2 days before they did, warned it somehow. I still don't know if it understood my words or just read the panic in my voice and body language. It looked at me for a long moment, and I swear I saw something like gratitude in those terrible eyes. Then it vanished deeper into the wilderness than I could follow. The hunting party found nothing, declared the reports exaggerated, went home. But I knew it was only temporary safety. The region was changing, more development, more tourism, less true wilderness to hide in. The creature's territory was shrinking year by year. I left Maine in 2003, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. My grants ran out, my research went nowhere. How could it when I was hiding the most significant discovery of my career? And staying started to feel less like science and more like obsession. The last time I saw the creature was October of that year, a cold, clear night with stars so bright they hurt to look at. It stood at the tree line like it had that first evening, watching me load my truck. I'd left enough food to last through the winter, caches hidden in places only it would find. We looked at each other across that clearing, two beings who'd witnessed something neither could explain to the world we came from. Then it turned and walked into the darkness, and I never saw it again. I don't know if it's still alive. I don't know if the transformation is permanent or if some part of Michael Rothstein still exists inside that changed form, aware and suffering and impossibly alone. I've spent 20 years trying to convince myself that I did the right thing by keeping silent, that some truths are too dangerous to reveal, that the creature deserved its privacy and protection more than science deserved its answers. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I wonder if I was just a coward. If I chose my own comfort over the possibility of understanding, over the chance that somewhere in a laboratory or university, someone smarter than me could find a way to reverse what had been done, to bring Michael Rothstein back from wherever he'd gone. The indigenous peoples were right. The Wendigo is real. But it's not a monster or a demon or a supernatural curse. It's what happens when a human being is pushed beyond every limit we pretend is absolute, when survival demands a price so high that it erases the boundary between man and animal, when isolation and desperation trigger changes in our biology that we don't have the courage to study because studying them would mean admitting how fragile our humanity really is. I learned the Wendigo's real origin. It's us. It's what we become when everything else is stripped away. And no scientist can explain it because explaining it would mean acknowledging that the monsters aren't out there in the dark woods. They're inside us, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge. That's the truth I've carried for 20 years. That's the secret that's killed every relationship, every friendship, every moment of peace I might have had. Because once you know that truth, once you've seen it looking back at you with eyes that still remember being human, you can never forget that we're all just one terrible winter away from transformation. And that's a knowledge that no amount of civilization can ever make comfortable. Thanks for following the story. If you can, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps YouTube share our content with more people. Also, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. That way we'll know where our viewers are from. Check out the other stories too. See you next time. Bye.